All right, we're set. And welcome back to Summer of Drawing, although it's almost fall of drawing. It feels a little bit cool today. There's a little bit of rain, and I'm really glad. So we're going to dive in really quickly to what I want to talk about today. But first of all, I want to give huge, huge thanks to the Vineyard Haven Public Library. Without them, this whole series and last summer wouldn't have happened. Poor Anne now has had to attend, 37 different art classes, if not more than that, because we did some things during the winter, I think one or two things last winter. And I hope to be able to do a couple of small programs this winter, and then we'll see what we do for next year. We'll have about 5 opportunities to draw today. We'll be doing a lot of sketching, but to start off with today, we'll be doing some exercises where I just sort of want you looking at the screen and thinking. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was how wonderful it is to be a part of this community with you. You know, Summer of Drawing has sort of become its own thing. When you read history books and you read about, the impressionist artists all hanging out at the cafes, smoking cigars and doing whatever. That actually didn't include an awful lot of the artists who were really working. Either they couldn't get to Paris and couldn't hang out, or they were back home looking after children and things like that. Or even some of the young fellows who traveled to Paris, were doing so on a shoestring, didn't have a lot of money. We tend to hear a lot more about, the very well-off people who had the time to, to paint and draw and travel, and think that that is what an artist's life should be like. And it's not realistic, and it's not always possible. I love John Singer Sargent, as you know, but I really rolled my eyes when I was reading a book about him the other day, and he had seen a particular scene in a barn or something like that, and he called for his watercolors and papers to be brought to him. And I was laughing. I'm like, wow, I'd like to call for my watercolors to be brought to me when I see something interesting as well. So sometimes when we read about artists and we think that that is somehow the life we should be living, what I would like to emphasize is that here today, this community, the Summer of Drawing, we are those people in the cafe. We may not be smoking cigars and such, but this is an art community in and of itself that's built itself over the course of now a couple of years. And I'm looking forward to it continuing in some form into the future. And so once again, I encourage you to keep in touch with me, but whenever you have a question or see an interesting artist you want to share or anything like that, I'm always happy to hear from you. Okay, welcome back to Summer of Drawing. Class number 20, we made it, and all of you made it. Thank you so much for your time and attention and for your dedication. So, someone asked me about South Dakota, and this is where we are right now. So, we have made it all the way across all of these various states, and we've been crossing the plains now for the last couple of classes. Right now, we're coming into Belfort, but we're not quite there. We'll be there at the end of the class. Right now, we're about at Sturgis and Rapid City. So Sturgis, you've probably heard about from the large motorcycle rally that they have every year. And so I figure at this point, we have abandoned the bus or the convoy of cars that we were all traveling in together. We are now on motorcycles. We are riding into Sturgis on our motorcycles. Our panniers are full of art supplies, and at least one of us has a sidecar with all the easels in it. So you can just picture that in your imagination as we move forward today. All right, so let's just talk a little bit again about memory and imagination, just to get back into this. Memory, the way I look at it, is your database of images, sounds, sights, smells, tastes that bring you into your artwork. And I mention all of these other senses because all of that does come into play. Sometimes if I'm listening to music while I'm drawing or painting something, when I return to that artwork to do it again, I can remember what I was listening to or what I heard. Likewise, paintings, the sense of smell in a forest, as I've mentioned before, is part of the experience of drawing and painting. And imagination is how you rearrange the contents of your memory and add new and fresh ideas by allowing your mind to move beyond the photo, beyond the scene in front of you, the reality, to create a scene or world of your own making. And so that can be realistic or abstract. It can hover between both. And really all that means is that you feel free to, sure, you can duplicate what you see, or you can make some changes. You can take things out, take out folds, add an apple, move some trees around, whatever it is you'd like to do. So the goal for your drawing and painting is for it to have some meaning to you on some level. It could be a sketch or something momentary, or a comprehensive record of something beautiful or important. So the other day I was sitting outside the hospital and waiting on a bus, and there was a lovely little sculpture they put out in the front with some little plaster pigeons on it. So I was sketching the pigeons. I mean, it wasn't anything major. It was just a few minutes of time I was wasting waiting for a bus, but something kind of fun. And when I look at it again, I'll remember where I was at that time. So drawing can be on any level, however much time you want to put into it. And I put the science fiction cover over here on the right, because so many times, one of the reasons I'm so keen on teaching drawing as opposed to necessarily painting or anything else, is because it's really important, and important for school children, important for everyone, and to feel confident enough holding a pencil and drawing that they can create whatever it happens to be. You know, people were thinking and drawing about rockets before we ever made it to the moon. This kind of willingness to draw it out, to sketch it out, whatever the idea is, requires a little bit of confidence. It requires a little bit of experience with even just holding a pencil. You just don't really get the same results jumping on a computer. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm also keen to see drawing come back into schools in a much stronger way than it is at the moment. But that's a topic for another day. So, you've heard me say observation and practice are the keys to mastery. Well, that is definitely the starting point. Because improving your technique is a matter of practice, and mastery to me is whatever you want it to be. So for some people, mastery is like, I'll be a master at art when I'm in the Louvre. Well, most of us, that's really not an attainable goal. What I'm hoping for instead is that mastery for you will mean that you have the confidence to use your drawing tools and draw whatever you want. Not to feel like, oh, I can't draw that because I don't really know how. Or if you do feel like that, like I do with the trois couleurs at the moment, that you're willing to just keep going back to it until you start to feel like you have some sense of mastery over it. So interesting drawings depend on observation. If you really want to draw something that looks interesting, you need to be able to see it. And so we've been practicing that all summer. And creating art that is fun and exciting means also keying in on your own point of view. And your own point of view is just, hey, what do you want to draw and why do you want to draw it? Could be anything at all. Could be a flower pot. Could be whatever. But just have some sort of idea of why it is interesting to you. As you draw, you'll be able to emphasize whatever that thing was. Was it the light falling in and the shadow that was cast? In that case, you make that really the focal point, and everything else is not quite as detailed. So that's how, this is all it takes to make drawings and paintings that are truly your own expression. And I heard somebody say something interesting the other day about style, and I wish I could remember who it was. It was on a podcast. And they said that style is nature filtered through personality. And I thought that was really interesting, because this is that business I was talking about, that you don't have to worry about style. Style just happens. When your personality, your point of view, what you like to draw, what captivates your attention, when that is focused upon, whatever comes out will be a drawing that's done in your style, your point of view. So I thought that was lovely. Nature filtered through personality. Okay, so we've got this incredible, interesting drawing by Peter Bruegel here. And so this is, these are beekeepers and the bird nester. The bird nester is the guy up in the tree, I take it. So this is a very odd looking, interesting looking drawing. And I'm assuming that the beekeepers were wearing outfits somewhat like this. I'm not quite sure. Bruegel and his son did a really amazing job of these sort of fantastic scenes with interesting looking creatures. But talk about point of view and making these sort of eerie characters out of these people walking around. So even when a person is drawing realistically, their own point of view comes through. And here we have two different people who are using pen and ink, basically. And what different expressions, Rembrandt, the looseness of the wash, the looseness of the child, the folds and such. Van Gogh with his wonderful directional strokes, the stippling and all those different textures. So many different ways to express yourself, so many different points of view. And you don't really have to try to be one or the other, because however you end up doing it will be your personal expression. So what we're going to do today, and if you saw these images earlier, you might have been like, what the heck? So depending on who you feel you are today, the person on the left or the person on the right, we are going to exercise our memory and imagination, and mostly the imagination today. And we are going to actually do a little bit of mental magic. So I thought that this sort of set the scene. Your magic wand ready to go. I told you this is the last class. I'm going for it. So we are going to be learning how to levitate and move objects today. And there was a meme that was out not too long ago where people were showing cats basically being levitated. I loved this particular image. But this is what we're going to do today. We are going to be doing a little levitation. And so levitation can be like Yoda. You can think of, just sort of with the power of your mind, how you're going to move objects around. You don't necessarily need a magic wand, though, such as those people attending Hogwarts or wanting to attend Hogwarts. We are going to be using the power of our mind and the power of the pencil to make this happen. So this is our magic wand today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to do some mental exercises. We're going to look at some pictures, and I want you to basically levitate objects and move them around. Don't have to draw them. I just want you to think about stuff. So we're going to start off right here. We've got this coffee cup and this pad of pencil. So I'm just going to talk you through it. While I'm talking you through it, I want you to mentally move things around. All right, so I'd like you to take that cup of coffee, and I'd like you to move it so that it's up above the pad of paper. You're scooting it around, maybe actually on the table, so that it's up closer to where the spirals of the notebook are. And just imagine what that would look like, how you would sketch that if that coffee cup had moved a little bit. And now, also, imagine how the pen would look sitting on top of the pad of paper. Now, in this particular case, the lighting is coming sort of from the upper right. So we don't have to worry a lot about shadows and stuff, but there might be a little bit of shadow cast by the saucer onto the pad of paper if we've got it close enough to the pad. And now that the pen is sitting on top of the pad of paper, there'll be a little cast shadow there. So sort of imagine what that looks like. And we'll go on to the next exercise here. So now we're doing a lot of things with cups this morning. Now what I'd like you to do is mentally levitate the cup and saucer and pull the book out and put the cup and saucer back down. And now imagine this scene without that book there, but just with the cup and saucer further down. So in this case, the light is coming in from the left. So when the cup and saucer are sitting down on the table, they will cast a little bit of a shadow, and depending on how close you've moved the cup and saucer to the pile of books, they might even cast a little bit of a shadow over onto the books. So these are the sorts of things that you think about when you're editing an image. You think about moving this stuff around, you sort of mentally create a picture in your mind and say, well, how is that going to look? And then when you're actually drawing it, or even beforehand, you think about the lighting and how moving things around changes the lighting. Now, sometimes I'll see people in Photoshop, they've edited a scene for an ad or something like that, and they've forgotten about the shadows. And so all of a sudden there'll be an object standing with no shadow, some sort of vampiric object. Or they'll have put the shadows in the wrong place. Shadows will be going in two different directions where they can't realistically do it. So when you are levitating and moving objects around, you want to consider where that light source is coming from and what happens. So here we do a little bit more levitation. So the first thing I'd like you to do is raise that cup and saucer back up in the air and put it on top of the pile of books. So you've just got one big column there. Sort of think of what that would look like. Now, what's interesting here is this is where perspective comes in. Now we're going to move that cup, but we can no longer show it just like we see it right here, because now we're looking at it from a little bit underneath, and we can tell that because we can see a little bit of the underneath of the red book at the top, just a tiny bit. But that tells us that another inch or two up, that the ellipse that is the oval that is the saucer, we're now going to be looking at the underneath of the saucer. Now, we won't be able to see inside of it because it's starting to move up. Likewise, we won't be able to see inside the cup anymore. So this is the kind of thing, as you're editing, you also pay attention to, is perspective and how that changes. So now I'd like you to think of taking, let's raise that cup and saucer up and let it float in the air. Take the top two books off, the red book and I think the black book, and then bring the cup and saucer back down. And now it's sitting on the third from the top book, and it's about, the rim of the cup is now at about eye level. That means that we won't be able to see under or over the top of the cup and the saucer. They'll both be at about eye level. Maybe the rim of the cup might be curved upwards a little bit because, of course, there's a distance there. So that perspective will start to change. So once again, this is just sort of stuff to keep in mind so that when you are manipulating scenes and moving things around, you're thinking about perspective and lighting and all the stuff we've talked about. So one last little mental exercise like this. I'd like that it just kills me to see that cup on top of that book. What were they thinking? The cup needs to be back in the saucer. So if you can just levitate that cup up and just move it back, that would be really great. Now, when you do that, if you rotate the cup at the same time so that the handle is over on the right, because maybe you think that's going to make a better composition, don't forget that the lighting is going to change, that the handle that is now in darkness is going to be in light. And so you have to sort of mentally imagine what that would look like. And the other thing I'd like you to do is mentally levitate the book that the cup was on with the red and white cover and turn it around so that we can see the spine. So this is where memory comes into play. Because we've seen a lot of books in our lifetimes, and we might not have noticed them to the detail to be able to do that. But if we say to ourselves, well, I'd really like to see the spine of that book, I'm going to sketch it like that, but maybe I have to look at a real book in real life to see what that would look like to make my drawing look right. And then you filed that information away in your memory for the next time you have to imagine something like this. All right, so now we're going to get to I think the first drawing exercise. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to levitate and move a whole bunch of objects around, and we're going to rearrange the shelves so that there are, what's on the shelves, I should say, so that there are 5 objects on the bottom shelf. That's all we're going to draw, are the 5 objects on the bottom shelf, not this whole scene. So I'd like you to have 3 objects that are down there already, stay in the same place, and bring 2 down from the top of the scene and make a little composition. We'll have about 5 minutes to do this in. So first of all, just look and pick your objects. Which are the 3 on the bottom that you'd like to keep? And which are the 2 things on the top that you think would be interesting to bring down and make a little composition? Now, in this particular case, because we have so little time to draw, just little outlines and a little, just a little sketch that would show what the objects are and where they're going to go will be fine. But the idea is to sort of visualize in your head how are you going to do that? Like, which ones are the most interesting to you? Do you want all of them to look complex? Do you want some of them to be kind of simple? How is that exactly going to work? The other thing that you'll pay a little bit of attention to, if you did have time to do a longer drawing on this, would be to figure out, to make sure the lighting did stay consistent. If you moved the 3 objects on the bottom around, or changed their directions to make sure the lighting was still coming kind of from over our left shoulder like it is at the moment. So this is just the kind of exercise that you can do when you do see something interesting and you go, wow, those are some really great shapes. I'll take a photo of it. But when you come home, you're like, wow, that isn't really a composition by itself. What am I going to do with this? So this idea of selecting from within your photo reference, using your memory perhaps of something else that isn't even in the scene to add in, and just being able to mentally levitate and move things around to satisfy your idea of a good composition, while still drawing up from the reference that you have here. So this is something that illustrators do quite a bit, because we're often given assignments to draw certain things in different perspective than we have reference for, or perhaps we can't find any reference at all, but there's an object that looks similar that we can think we can we can turn into what it is. And we have to be able to imagine that. We have to be able to put it together. And this sort of rearranging is the key to how that goes. So when we were talking earlier on about composition, and we were talking about grouping objects, with a variety of heights, perhaps 3 of them are together and 2 of them are off to the side, or you've got some things in the back and some things in the front. However you want to do it is absolutely fine. But it's these kinds of little sketches that we're making right now that help you make those decisions. So what I would end up doing if I were going to do a full drawing of something like this would be to make maybe a series, like maybe 3 or 4 or even more, various different arrangements until I hit something that I was like, okay, that's the best one. Because your first inclination isn't always the best inclination. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. Oops. Okay, we're going to do the same sort of thing here. We've got a few of these. So in this particular case, I'd like you to rearrange the top shelf so that there are 5 objects on it again, but only 2 of them can remain from what you see right here. So once again, we've got a variety of different objects, a variety of different sizes. You don't have to worry about the wording unless you want to put it on there. But we'll take another 5 minutes or so to just rearrange. Once again, you can have them very consistently laid out like they are at the moment. Once again, if you're taking objects, say from the 3rd shelf down, and you are putting them, any of those cans, on the top shelf, you're changing the perspective. See how you can see the top of the cans on the 3rd shelf and the bottom shelf, but you can't see the top of them when they're up there on the very top shelf. So pay attention to how your those objects, any of those objects, are going to change just slightly in perspective as you move them from the lower shelves to the upper shelves. So take just a few more minutes to do that. By the way, I found out that the Latin word for levitation, it comes from levitas, which means lightness. So you are, like Yoda, mentally moving all of these objects around and then drawing them. So I'm sure it's easy to see where where I'm going to with this. That by being in control of your pens and pencils, by being in control of your brush if you're painting, by being able to imagine and move objects around without feeling any any lack of confidence, that's the start to doing artwork that really is your own. It allows you to go out into a landscape and look at it and go, you know what? I'm just going to levitate that tree over to the right, or I'm just going to pop it right on out of the scene. And I'm going to levitate that other object I see, maybe that big, beautiful flowering bush, and pop it in there instead because I like the color. It frees you from looking at that photograph and going, wow, I have to do everything exactly the way that I see it right there. Because sometimes only a portion of what's in it really needs to be shown to give the message of what was interesting. In this particular case, I love all of these labels and such, but I don't need 35 or however many objects there are to really get that point across. 3, 5, 7 even would do the trick. The top 2 shelves perhaps, if I was really getting carried away. But this allows you to sort of select what you think best tells the story that you're trying to tell. All right, just a couple more minutes on this one, and then we're going to move on. I do love these particular tins, though. I think they're wonderful. And I was looking at the bottom where it says super bright duplicating fluid. And I was like, what is that? And now someone here may perhaps knows what that is. But duplicating fluid, one's imagination, it's kind of, is that like an invisible cloak? Can I clone myself using that? Anyway, I thought that was really great fun. Okay, let's move on to the next one. All right. So in this particular case, this is the last of these sets of objects on shelves. In this case, what I'd like you to do is just rearrange the middle shelf so that there are only 5 objects on it using anything else. So you're just drawing the middle shelf, not the other ones. You can select any of these objects, any 5, and just put them together. Now, by using the middle shelf, it's made it a little bit easier. We're not having to deal with perspective because really you can't, everything looks pretty flat. The top of the rims of the jugs, the bottom of the jugs and the saucers. So there's no doubt this is the easiest perspective. What is difficult, though, is to look at this entire grouping and figure out which ones you like the best. So what I tend to do when I'm looking at this is I go, well, which are the 3 that are capturing my eye the most? Which are, just pick 3. It could be one that's heavily ornamented, one that's hardly ornamented, and something in the middle. You kind of like the 3 bears. Or it could be 3 different shapes or something like that. And then I pick 2 other things to go along with that. So for example, say I picked 3 jugs, I might pick the saucer and the cup, and then the plate, because those would be different from the 3 jugs, and then that might make an interesting design. Or if the 3 objects I had picked were all of the same sizes, the 2 other things I would pick would be different sizes. So sometimes it's easy to do that, to kind of go for those 3 objects first, and then add in what you need, if you need anything else. Now, at this point, because you are rebellious motorcycle riders, we are going through Sturgis with our art supplies, and you might be saying, hey, Elizabeth, I just want to use 3 objects only, so there. I would say that after 20 classes, you're allowed to do that. So, but this is the kind of, when you take photographs in particular of things like this to draw later, and you come home and you're sort of going, well, is there a composition in here? I can see a couple of compositions that are kind of ready-made, ready to go. I'm not going to tell you which ones they are. But in general, I would want to, with all of this opportunity and all of this variety, I would want to move things around. I would want to try some different stuff. So this is how you do that. This is how you make use of all of that really great reference material that you're gathering. At the same time, if you sit down to sketch something like this, what's wonderful is it's kind of pre-selected for you. You've got objects. You can make a nice little drawing. You can practice your technique. There are some good lost edges going on in here, by the way, around the edges or the bottoms of some of these jugs, and as the shadows form, and as as one object casts its shadow onto an object behind it, there are some really good opportunities to practice some lost edges and things like that. So if you're looking for subject matter to draw and you want to mess around with this one, there's a lot of good stuff here. Plus, any of you who have tried jugs, cups, handles, and mugs, handles are difficult. They're a real challenge to get the proportions right. Likewise, getting proportions of all these different objects to be accurate when you're bringing them down from the top shelf or up from the bottom shelf. All of that, is taken into account as well. So that gives you something to work with. So just a little bit more time on this one, then we'll move on to the next exercise. By the way, if anybody has a cup of coffee out there, and hopefully I'm not speaking too early, or coffee or tea or water. I think this is time to raise a toast to the cell phone gods and their mobile hotspot plans. So far, I haven't had to do any classes this year from Chappie Point, which I am very grateful for. So far, so good. We just have to get ourselves through another half an hour to make sure that works. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is going to be a little more tricky. All right, we got cowgirls. Isn't this a fabulous photograph? But I only want you to have 3 cowgirls. So I would like you to draw a grouping, and I'll give you a little bit more time for this one, about 7 minutes. We'll go till about 20 to 12, according to my watch here. What I'd like you to do is just pick 3 of these cowgirls and draw them together as if none of the other ones were standing there. So you're just going to eliminate some, scoot others over. Because you won't have a lot of time to draw details and such, what I would do is I just sort of look at the overall shapes of each cowgirl, and then you can draw in some of the dark areas, like, you know, underneath the hats and the skirts or things like that, or some of the shadows on the ground behind them, or whatever you want. Don't worry about details and faces and things like that, because that'll get you off on a sidetrack. I'm more interested in is you looking at the people as objects and moving the objects around. So any 3, put them together in a little grouping. What I would like to suggest is don't just pick 3 that are already together. You know, please try to eliminate some and move them. Because I looked at that just now going, wait a minute, they could be just like lopping off the ones off the side. So, I mean, if you're already doing that, that's fine. But if you can take the time to actually select 3 and put them together, that would be marvelous. Now, what happens often, like if I'm drawing or painting a scene like this, and say I wanted the girl in the check shirt and to be on the far right, I would have to figure out how she's holding her arm. So I might like there's another woman next to her who's got her hand on her hip, and I might say, well, I'd like the woman in the check shirt to have her hand on her hip, and so I would use that arm as sort of a model to make the girl's arm that I needed, but then just add check shirt to that. So that is the sort of thing when you're dealing with doing drawings of people and figures, it's okay to sort of find body parts from other people and pictures to use, or you can say, if you've got a friend of yours standing in front of you, you can say, hey, can you just hold your arm like this for a minute? You know, your arm looks like it would be about the right arm. And that way I can draw this person. Of course, you would, once again, you would be looking for, where's the light coming from? You know, how are those folds going to work? Are they going to be the same? The one woman is taller than the other woman. Are you going to have to make some adjustment for that? You know, how is that going to actually work? Would that woman actually be standing like that? So this is where having a live person just sort of stand for you for a couple of minutes really helps. More than once, I have seen actually in an art department I used to work in, we didn't do it so often because we were working often from photo reference. But sometimes somebody would be like, you know, can you hold your hand up in a certain way? Because I need to draw a hand. And more recently on the internet, somebody on either Instagram or Facebook or something said, help, I need somebody to hold their elbow at this kind of angle and send me a photo right now. And so a whole bunch of people, you know, sent them reference material to use so that this person could finish off her painting properly. But, you know, bodies and clothing and hats and all of that stuff are really no different from cans and saucers and books and all of that. You just have to pay attention to some of that same information. Where's the light coming from? Will the perspective have changed? Will there be a cast shadow falling? Now, for example, if we look at the girl with a check shirt, a cast shadow, and say she was going to be on the far right, a cast shadow would not be falling on her from the person next to her. Her shoulder would be completely lit. So that would make a difference on how you do the drawing. So all of that stuff is important as you do move things around, but you completely have that ability you know, you are that wizard who can make things levitate, who can move things around. And the pencil really is your magic wand, because although you would end up with a realistic drawing, it's just like when we were looking at Whistler's Mother, that painting the other week. And I was saying, you know, there could have been all kinds of crap all around the floor, bunched up paper. There could have been extra things hanging on the wall. We have no idea. With the magic of his pencil and paintbrush, he eliminated all of that stuff and he just left this really good composition. And that is what we have the power to do. It's a matter of confidence. Is all it is. And just a little bit of that observation. You're so used to looking at this stuff now, the contrast and the lighting and such. And it's just a matter of remembering that you have to actually do that when you are moving things around. But by doing so, you can take reference material of any different sort, live objects, not live objects, and put them together. For example, you could take your 3 cowgirls, say you did a more complete drawing, and you might have seen a barn down the street from you or something like that. And you perhaps either, or maybe it's out in your own backyard, and you decide you would like that barn in the back of your scene, and you can just draw it in. You could add in whatever you want. Once again, I'm paying attention to perspective. How far away would it be? If you were looking at these women right now, you're at about neck level. So where would that make the barn go? You know, and you would just ask yourself these particular questions. Okay, time to wrap this one up because we have another exercise to do. I know this one was a little bit complicated. Okay, now we're going to move on. All right, so when people think about, and this occurred to me when I was sitting in an office the other day, and there was a door that was closed, and it had a piece of wood across it. And I was thinking to myself, what is behind that door? I just can't figure it out. I mean, it was like a regular office door, but you know, of course, your sort of your formulaic response, right, is to think, oh my goodness, it's probably just a desk or it's a store cupboard or something like that. And you don't think anything else of it. But actually, anything could be behind that door, anything at all. You just have to use your imagination. So when people think about like mysterious doors, you think of something like this, you know, okay, behind that, maybe there's, you know, like a wizard's cauldron or there's, a dungeon, or there's, you know, who knows what. So we have a tendency to go, okay, we see a doorway like this and we think of a particular kind of story. Maybe we think of, you know, King Arthur and his knights, or who knows what, or we think of a horror story or something like that. But so by doing that, we have then created another formula, right? We haven't thought about the store cupboard with the mops, but we've resorted to yet another sort of instant response, one brought about by by fairy tales. Excuse me. I got a frog in my throat. Excuse me. By fairy tales, by movies, by, you know, popular culture. So what we're going to do is we're not going to draw any of these doors. What I want you to do is think about what lies behind this door and think of all the possibilities that there can be. I'm going to talk you through this because this is the kind of door I was looking at. So think of Narnia, for example. If you read the C.S. Lewis books, right? They went through the back of a wardrobe and there was an entire world back there. So there could be an entire world behind this door. You could open this up and there could be birds and trees. There could be a rushing stream. It could be Mars. You know, there could be planets. There could be a desolation of desert out there. There could be, when you open this door, there could be steps leading up to somewhere or to nowhere. There could be steps leading down. There could be people running around back there. there could be all sorts of stuff. So now that I've kind of given you a few prompts, I'm just going to be quiet for a few minutes, and I want you to just think, you know, beyond the store cupboard, what could be behind this door when you open it up? Now, once you've decided what might be there and you've started sketching it, feel free to add things in as you go. And tell yourself a little story. For example, say I was looking out there and I saw the rushing river and some trees and birds. And I might go, okay, the river is meandering through the countryside, and in the distance there are hills, and on one of the hills is a small house. And so I would sort of like start talking myself through the scene, what other objects would be in there. Where would they be in the scene? What's dark and what's light? Where is the light shining from? Um, might even think about, oh, what am I hearing, or what else might be around off the edges that I can't even see because I haven't gone through the door. I've just opened the door and I'm looking in there. What is in there? Is there any interesting sort of smell? And the other thing I'd like you to do as you kind of sketch out what this would look like. And of course, it's going to be rough. You're basically making visual notes of what's in your imagination, because at this particular point in the process of creating a drawing, you're just sort of getting the stuff from your head onto the paper. So someone might look at what you sketch and go, what the heck is that? But you know what it is because you've been talking yourself through it. But it's also useful at this point to make some notes along the side of your sketch about what the objects are, and colors. So I might be like, okay, I've got a willow tree that I want to have leaning over here, and I want to make sure the base is dark, and I'd like to have some fish underneath there in the water, or something like that. So I might make some notes, even about things I can't see in my sketch right now, but that I can imagine. And this is how I keep a lot of my sketchbooks. I'll have an idea like that, something crazy like that, like what's behind that door in that office, and I'll make these little notes and I'll make a little drawing. I'll just let my imagination go crazy. And hey, maybe a year or two from now, I decide I actually want to do something like that. And it might not even be that particular sketch that I did that day, but it might be that concept, the concept of opening up a door in the most mundane wall with a mundane looking door, but having something amazing. Like maybe it's the ocean. Maybe there's ships sailing. It could be anything I want it to be. What's interesting to me about drawing something like that is the juxtaposition between the more sterile world we're in as the viewer, and then what is lying behind the door, the richness of what is lying behind the door, and that whole concept, because it's unexpected. And I think it would be fun. I mean, if each one of you did a drawing like that at some point during your drawing career, we would end up with, 50, 60 different, completely different ideas about what's behind there. So that would just be quite interesting. But in the meantime, you can see how exercises like this lead you away from that formulaic response. And even when we see those mysterious doors, perhaps one of those doors has the opposite behind it. Perhaps instead of a dungeon or a witch or whatever, perhaps there's an office back there. Perhaps you open up one of those doors, in a castle, and you come across the administrator instead, which actually probably would happen these days. But that idea of your imagination can put disparate subject matter together to create something that, even though everything in it is something we've seen before, the mashup is unusual and catches people's attention. So we'll just spend about 3 more minutes on your imaginary world here. And really, when you think about it, almost every time you take up a pencil and draw something, you've created something imaginary, because that cup is no longer exactly the cup you see before you. The still life has become something different under your pen. The scene that you see out there resembles what you're feeling, but every object isn't exactly where you're drawing it, and neither should it be, because our job is not to be huge color copiers, or black and white copiers if we're drawing. Our job, per se, when it comes to art, is to look at it through our own lens, through our own observation, our own interpretation, and show the wonder of the world around us. And that goes for abstraction as well. The fact that we can actually create abstract drawings and artwork is amazing. That we can take concept and just find another form for it that it isn't even based on reality is really stunning. So the possibilities are endless. And I would like you to spend a little time this winter, actually for the rest of your lives, levitating objects and moving them around mentally, like around your home, like when you're having your lunch, when you're having breakfast, or when you're out walking around. Just mentally move stuff about. Lift it up, take it away, put other things in its place. Slide your coffee table around your coffee cup around the table, and see what it would look like in different places, how the light would fall on it. It's an extremely fun and useful exercise. That it's also a confidence builder, so that when it is time for you to draw, you've got no problem with the idea of moving and editing things around, whether in real life or in your photography. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up your drawing here about what lies behind the door. Okay, and we'll move on. Okay, so just to sort of wrap up this whole memory and imagination thing, to get back to the more the drier version. So artists can exercise their memory functions to store the high level information about objects and scenes. So when we're moving things around and we're levitating and we're thinking about the light and this, that, and the other, we're creating that database, that storehouse of information. We can draw it, we can sketch how it would look, we can just think about how it would look. Either way, we're helping build up that database of observation. So that's the visual memory. The emotional memory is also all of the other stuff that comes with that. The noticing the light, the smelling the coffee, the feeling of the scene. Maybe it's a calm morning with light coming in the window. All of that is something to pull into your drawings when you can, that feeling. And often that happens without us even really having to note it. We don't necessarily have to say, okay, I want it to look like a sunny day or something like that. Just by correctly observing how the light falls in. And perhaps if there is a little bit of dust in the air, a little atmosphere, so things in the distance look a little bit fuzzy, that we make sure that we've drawn it that way. And that gives that feeling of the light, of the strong morning light coming in, or whatever it might happen to be. And so the last thing is this business we did today with imagination, using artistic inventiveness to focus the idea of the scene, enhance the idea, eliminate things that aren't contributing, and add in elements that support the idea. So I want to just talk about the idea thing again. Sometimes people get hung up on this business of the big idea, and I tend to use the phrase interchangeably. Both to mean like a concept that's very important, like what might that be? World peace, right? Let's get a really big concept. That's definitely a big idea. But also to me, the big idea is whatever is important to you about what you're trying to draw. It can be anything at all. If I hold up my coffee cup and say, well, the light shining in in a particular way, and that's attractive to me, that's the big idea. So, that phrase just means, where am I focusing my attention for this drawing or painting? I think that's important so that we don't get ourselves wound up in the idea that we always have to be drawing something to do with world peace. We can sometimes just be drawing, a stack of books or whatever it happens to be, because it looks interesting to us. So, every single one of these artists, and I'm showing paintings just because they're kind of colorful and easy to look at, every single one of these artists used observation, practice. They showed their point of view. Each one of these people had things they thought were interesting and things they didn't think were interesting. And they keyed in on those things that they thought were interesting and sort of decided what they liked the most about them, what they thought was most important. If it was a scene out of their imagination, for example, Venus on the half shell absolutely was not floating by to have her painting done. This is definitely from the imagination. So But when that was done, things were decided to be included, things were decided not to be included. You know, that was all the point of view of the particular artist. Likewise, Guernica, you know, the drawing of that, the cubism, everything that Picasso did for that, very different kind of feel, you know, different sort of message. His point of view came across just because he decided this was the best way to show his particular idea. Memory and imagination. So every time a person is drawing anything that isn't right there in front of them, or it has changed something around, to, you know, just like we did levitating the books and all of that, changing something around, we're relying on that storehouse of memories that we've built up. And then imagination. So Edvard Munch might have seen someone screaming like that, or that could just be out of his imagination. But there are still things in there, you know, the sunset, the bridge, the people, all of that came from that database of imagery that he had. And then the Klimt painting down in the corner. Obviously, design factored hugely into that, but so did the memory of what people look like, so did shape, so did balance. And also this concept of just being able to imagine something that sort of straddles realism and imagination, where design is so key, and just the beauty of a particular scene comes through without relying on realism at all. So when you look at artwork, you know, whether it's in a museum or a gallery or whatever, and think about how each one of these artists, or the artist you're looking at, brought into play all those exact same techniques and approaches that you use for your drawing as well. There is nothing that separates our artistic community in this way. All of these, somewhere along the line, all sorts of ideas of what you're trying to create came into being, and involved a variety of different approaches, but imagination, memory, point of view, practice, observation, all of that is key to art of all sorts: sculpture, you know, printmaking, painting, and drawing throughout hundreds and hundreds of years. So you are just continuing with a very strong tradition in art by using these same sorts of skills for your own drawings. All right, so we wrap up with the same sort of information we talked about last week. Our goal is to communicate, even if it's just to ourselves. We're observing the world around us. We're developing our point of view. We're using our memory and imagination. Continue this winter to draw objects and scenes with an emphasis on observing. Use your memory to collect ideas. Use your imagination, your levitation skills to rearrange elements. That's all there is to it. And then you have to actually draw. You have to actually put that pencil to paper. So welcome to Belfort, South Dakota, the geographic center of the nation. We have made it the 2019.1 miles from Chappaquiddick Island, or from wherever you're watching this particular class. It looks like a really fascinating little town, and I hope to visit it someday. And so it was the symbolic center of, you know, we're all across the country, and some of us in different countries even, just say that we're on this journey. We're coming to Belfort. We're stopping at all these other little towns on the way to try these different drawing media. So from here, as you continue, please try some of those drawing media again, and try to get better at them. You know, we only had, what, an hour or two to play with all of that stuff. You know, I certainly am going to be diving back in and seeing if I can't improve my skills in some of them. And not all. Perhaps you might decide you like, you know, charcoal better than this, or you know, I like silver point, somebody else might not care for it, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is, from this point on, as you travel to wherever you're going to go, it doesn't have to be in a straight line. You don't have to be like, oh, I have to do exactly these certain things. Take your time to explore different drawing media, different approaches, and see what you hit upon. I know you're going to have some fun on the way. All right, I did want to also mention, and this will be in the PDF, so I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but there are online drawing classes that you can take. They'll still be continuing, mostly, I think, because in part the pandemic is continuing, but also many of these groups have discovered that there are a lot of people who can join who would never be able to do in-person classes or workshops. So when you are signing up, because some of them have gone back to doing some in-person classes. Make sure you're signing up for the online ones. Otherwise, they could be expecting you in London next week. So there's Drawing America, London Drawing, and there's Art in the Park. There are definitely other groups, but these are particular ones that I've done various classes and such with them. Their offerings vary, so just have a look and see what you think might be interesting. If you go to Eventbrite, a lot of these different groups actually have you sign up, or if there's a payment to be made to do it through Eventbrite. So you can actually go straight to Eventbrite and search for online drawing classes or online life drawing or art history or whatever, to watch lectures, to take part in things, in drawing sessions whenever you want to. So like I said, this will be in the PDF and this information. If you have any questions, just let me know. And I think that is it. Yes, we'll go back to, I'll stop screen sharing. Okay, and there's one more. We haven't quite finished the class yet. There's one more thing I want to show you. So I've been you guys are a great excuse for me to buy a lot of books. I bought so many books this summer. But this one I wanted to point out. This is called A Better Approach to Pencil Drawing by Frank Rines. And it's a book that was put out, I think it was either the 30s or the 50s. Let me have a quick look here. Can't tell. 1940. Okay, first started off in 1935. So this is one of those books that doesn't have a lot of what we would consider instruction today, like the how-to. Does go over some basics at the beginning. But what I really loved was there were lots and lots of pictures, and there was one in particular that, so I know there's a fellow on here who wanted to do some covered bridges, and there was someone else who had mentioned wanting to draw trees. Where was this really? There was a really good tree in here. So there are lots of on this page. Here it is. Whoops. Here we go. So in this particular book, his intention is that you're going to copy out some of his drawings, and thereby you're going to improve your skills at drawing. So here's like one with the cows. There we go, I got my focus back. And I would say that if you're just sort of stuck for something to do and you would like to do some drawing, you will learn so much from copying the drawings in his book. I did some the other night just of a few trees, and it was really helpful. And the other reason I'm pointing this book out to you is because there's something that he mentioned in the front, which I actually hadn't tried before, but made so much sense. He suggested taking your pencils and using a pencil, a piece of sandpaper or whatever, sharpening the tips so that they have a 45-degree angle on them. And then that makes it easier to draw the trees, because you can mass in those areas so much more quickly. And of course, you can use other pencils along with that to do the more pointy bits. And as smart as, I mean, that seems so basic, and I do it all the time. What's crazy is I do it all the time when I'm painting. I pick brushes and I use them in that way. But there's no doubt for buildings and for trees and things like that, having at least one or two of your pencils sharpened in such a way so that there's a 45-degree angle on the end really does help. So give that a shot as well. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I have so appreciated your time and effort. Thank you very much for being a part of the community of Summer of Drawing. I hope you have a lot of fun levitating objects, drawing them, and perhaps even going back through all of these videos again. Because when I look at the ones we did earlier this summer, I'm like, wow, we have covered a lot of ground. Thank you all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the future.